Hello everybody, it's me again and welcome back to your professional diploma in digital marketing and SEO. Today's lesson is all around analytics. In today's lesson, we are going to understand properties and dimensions versus metrics. Then we will move on to creating views and the best practices around those. Then top reports, which is just part 1 because we are going to be carrying on with reports in lesson 4. And we will close off with goal setup and event tracking. One of the most important things I'm going to tell you about analytics is that before looking at it, please have a clear goal in mind in terms of what you want to achieve by looking at your analytics. Do you want to see your website performance or a specific page's performance or an audience? Have that clear goal. Otherwise, it is a complete rabbit hole. There's so much information, data, reports, so many things that you can do, and you can literally get lost for hours. So first up, we have properties. And what is a property in Google Analytics? It is a website or app associated with a unique ID. So it's given a unique ID. And this ID is included in the tracking code that is used. So all the pages on your site that you would add your tracking code to would contain the property ID. This is how Google actually knows to send performance data to the correct website or app analytics. Of course, it does need a way to link a website to its analytics, and this is how it does it. You can have more than one property in an account. For example, let's say that you have two sites, a .com and a .co.uk. And you've given them the same property ID. That is not unusual. It might be the same business, but they're just in different markets and they're not using the same site. What this would do is it would pull data from both sites into one analytics property, and you would then use different filters and views to see the performance per site or whatever your reasons were for combining the data of those sites. We are looking at filters and views in these next 2 lessons. Then just an example ID. This is what it would look like across the board. Obviously the numbers would be different, but it always starts with the UA and has the dashes. And the number 1 is referring to it being the first property or the first tracking code. Then we have dimensions. Dimensions are a descriptive attribute or characteristic of data that can be given different values. So it's not numerical like metrics. It's really a different way to segment your information. So, for example, you could get more information on your website traffic by segmenting by page, location, your browser, and more. So these are all dimensions, and there are many, many more, and you will see more as we go through all the reports. And as I said, metrics are quantitative measurements. So that is how they differ to dimensions. And what I mean by that is just look quickly at this report here. This is basically what a standard report in analytics looks like. On the left here would be your dimensions. So these are the channels in this example: organic search, direct, referral, social, etc. Then at the top would be your metrics. So what are you actually measuring these different channels against? And that's things like users, new users, sessions, etc. You can see what I'm seeing. Then underneath that would be the data, which is of course linked to the metrics. It is good to keep this in mind as we go through the different reports. You'll generally see the dimensions always on the left, and then of course the metrics would be next to that with the relevant data. The next step after creating a property would be to have different views. Now, a view is one level down from a property, essentially. You would see analytics and reports based on selected criteria. And what I mean by selected criteria is different filters, which we are covering in the next lesson. A view without any changes to the data is created at the same time as the property. This is something that Google implements by default. So as soon as you've created your analytics property, then you will have that unfiltered view, is essentially what it's called. Where you would create your views is within the admin section of your analytics. If you go right to the end here, you can see something that says create view. So you would select that button. And then once you've done that, you would see something like this. If it differs, Google Analytics, as I've mentioned before, update regularly. Hundreds to thousands of updates in a year, but the information would remain the same. So you choose which data you would want to create the view for, so either your website or a mobile app. You would give your reporting view a name, and it is important to specify that you use a clear name so that you understand immediately when you see it what it's about. Then your reporting time zone, which would be where you are based. And it's also good to know that you can have a maximum of 25 views per property. I think it is very important to create 3 different views. The first one would be your unfiltered view, so the default view that Google created with the account. I would suggest you leave this as it is so that you can fall back on this if the data is looking incorrect in other views. Then you have something that I would call a sandbox, and this is where you would test all the changes that you want to make. You would do it in this view so that if there is an error or anything like that, you haven't affected your main data. This is a great way to play around with analytics and see what can or can't be achieved. And then finally, you would have a master view. And this is the view that you would use to view and analyze your data with all the different filters or exclusions or whatever setup you need in place. Essentially, once you have created a view or you have your unfiltered view, you can actually go into the view and make a copy and then just rename it something else. And do that a few times so you have your sandbox and your master, and then you can go and make the necessary changes. Okay, so we are ready to look at some reports. First up though, the top questions that people ask of their website, so what they would actually want reports for, would be which channels provide the most traffic, makes sense. Which channels contribute the most revenue, which makes even more sense from a performance perspective. What is the goal conversion rate? So how many conversions do you have versus the number of people that have visited your site? How long do people stay on my site? So are they engaged or are they just exiting, in the first 30 seconds or whatever it is? What are the top pages visited? And which pages are not performing. Another important thing to remember is that some reports are not helpful on their own. Specifically, the overview reports, you would need to dig in deeper. You'll see what I'm talking about just now. But this is why the further segmentation with things like dimensions are so useful, because then you can really drill down and see not just how many views of a page you have, but what is the gender or age or location of the different people that have viewed your page. The first reports that we are going to be looking at are called the audience reports. And this is what it looks like, the overview at least. On the left here, you can see all the different options that fall within the audience section of analytics. We will not be going through all of them right now. So we have the overview, and you can see that on the right. This is pretty standard. So you'll have your users in total, the percentage of new users, the sessions that those users have been responsible for, the number of sessions per user. So if they've spent more than 30 minutes on a site or the session wasn't closed. Do you remember when I said, someone might visit a site and then completely forget about it, but it's still open in their browser? That session will remain up until 30 minutes and then be closed. Then you have your page views as well. And in this case, the number of page views is quite significantly higher than the new users. This is the demo merchandise account. So it's retail, it's e-commerce. So you would expect there to be a number of pages per session. And in this case, there's 4.11. Then your average session duration and your bounce rate. And you guys all know what that is. If you look on the left again, just to see the number of reports that are available. So this is the overview, as I mentioned. You can then see active users, lifetime value, which we've also spoken about before, a cohort analysis, which is quite complex and actually not finished. This is what the beta means. It's that it's in testing, so it might not have all the features that Google are planning to implement. Then you have your audiences, and this is different to the audience at the top. It's the actual audiences that you've created in Google Analytics. Again, we will be looking at that later. Then your demographics, and this is regarding your users' age and gender. Your interests, which we'll be looking at just now. Geo, behavior, we'll be looking at those two as well. Then your technology, which is regarding the network that they're on, the device that they're using, the operating system, etc. Mobile is similar, except it's devoted to mobile. Cross-device, which is also in testing, and this is talking about people, let's say someone searches something on mobile, they decide they want to buy something, but then they complete the purchase on desktop. This would be called a cross-device conversion, and then is therefore something that you could look at in analytics. Like I said, though, it's in testing, so I wouldn't 100% perhaps trust the information there, and that is why you'd also look at your different platforms. Then there's custom, benchmarking, and user flow, which we're not going to be going through right now. So we are going to be looking at the interests report next. So this is the interests overview, and they are similar to what you would see in platforms like Google Ads and Facebook. Pretty much almost exact in terms of the way that it is shown. However, in analytics, it's not just looking at a particular channel, at least in the overview. You know, you can segment it by different channels, but overall, these are the interests of all your visitors. Here we can see that there are 3 categories. You have your affinity category, so there's an interest in these different topics. Your in-market segments, which I'm sure if you remember, these are people that Google thinks are at the bottom of the funnel and ready to make a purchase or convert if it's not a purchase. And while you could use this data to determine your targeting, let's say you have a display campaign running and you're going to then target these different categories and in-market segments, but it is more useful if you actually add different segments to this report. So if you look at the top here, I've added all users, your converters, and then all paid traffic. As much as I'm interested in the other kinds of traffic, I do want to make sure that my paid traffic is targeting and converting the highest intent or quality people. So it's interesting to see here if there are any differences between the 3 segments. So on the left in the blue, there's all users, orange is converters, and then green is paid traffic. If we just look at the converters and the paid traffic segments, we can see that the first 4 affinity categories are the same. So shoppers, media, technology, and sports and fitness. But then it starts to differ in that 5th one is lifestyles and hobbies among converters, whereas in paid traffic, it's banking and finance. And I mean, I wouldn't base any huge decisions on this information. It depends on the volume. So have you got a lot of people visiting your site or only a few? If a few, then it's not really enough data to determine whether you need to make a change to your targeting. But it just is interesting to look at, because if you see big differences, then it's definitely something worth testing, adding it to your targeting to see if it does perform. If we look at the in-market segments for converters and paid traffic, the top 2 are the same, but then it changes from software and business productivity in converters to travel, hotels, and accommodation. However, it's the 4th on the list with the in-market segment for paid traffic. So it's not a huge difference in interests. This is a good source, as I mentioned, for targeting, but it also could be great for content. You could write content around these different topics. If we move on to site engagement, which is also a report available within the audience section, you can see that I have kept the different segments of all users, okay, that's the default, converters, and paid traffic. This report is based on session duration and page depth. And page depth is referring to how many pages they visited. If we move down, I'm not so much interested in the top information, but more about the table, starting with 0 to 10 seconds. If you look at the all users line, you can see that there's a huge volume of people who are spending 10 or less seconds on your site. And this does indicate that the traffic is not interested in what you have to offer. What you could do with this information is you could create an audience of these people and exclude them from your targeting. So anyone who spends 10 seconds or less on your site will not be targeted again. There might be some cases in which this is a really bad idea, but it is an option and something to consider. We are going to be looking at creating audiences in the next lesson. But let me just scroll down and show you that it increases. So we have 181 to 600 seconds, ending with 1801 plus. And you can see there that the volume is very low. You wouldn't be able to do much, the volume is too low for an audience to be created. So it is important to remember that more time on the site means that people are more engaged. Now, you might also want to segment this by the actual page that people are visiting, so then you can see how the different pages individually are performing. So as I mentioned, you can create lists based on any of these timeframes and either include or exclude in your targeting. The geo report is self-explanatory. This is the location overview, though I have added a converters segment, so that's why you can see the map of the world is duplicated. The location report can show you where your most engaged converting users are coming from, which also then enables you to focus your marketing in those areas where you'll see the best return, especially if you have a low budget, or you're looking to cut down somewhere. However, unless you're a global brand, really, this information is too broad on its own. So then what you can do is you can segment further by city, which is very helpful, especially if you're, location based or trying to focus on specific cities around your area. And again, I have the segments of all users and converters. The not set in brackets that you can see at the top there is basically that Google couldn't find where their location was. And you can actually see that the percentage of all users here is higher than, other individual cities. And I don't actually know if Google is providing all the information in their demo account, as it only says one transaction. New York, in this case, has the highest number of transactions, but it's 2 versus 1. But it's interesting to see, for example, that New York has a higher pages per session number, so 6, just over 6, versus London, which has 3.6 pages per session. Also less transactions, less time on site. So you could, kind of tell or say that London is a lower performer than New York. With that information, you could either, let's say, exclude London completely, or you could just reduce your bids in that area and perhaps increase them in New York. Before we move on to additional reports, like acquisition, acquisition is not really going to help you unless you have your goals set up. So let us go through that now. First up, you need to know if you're using standard tracking or Google Tag Manager, GTM. If you haven't set this up yourself, you might not know, so it's important to know. Then conversions need to be set up in analytics, because otherwise it won't pick up any conversion tracking from other sources. For example, Facebook advertising. Let's say that within Facebook you have your pixel, which has been implemented across your site, and you've created goals within the native platform, so within the Facebook Business Manager. Even though you've done that, analytics won't pick that up, so it does need to still be created or duplicated in your analytics account. We will be looking at different social reports in lesson 4, so the next one. So goals can be accessed in your admin section again, and there is the goals button. There are template goals and custom goals, which often don't differ much. It's just that the templates are pre-populated with the relevant information. And the categories that you can choose are from revenue, acquisition, and inquiry. If those don't fit you or you're not comfortable with using one of those, then you would go to custom, but we'll have a look at that now. This is what a template goal would look like. So the first step would be your goal setup. So choosing one of those options between those categories, revenue, acquisition, etc. Your goal description. It would either be the name from the template. So here I've chosen view more, but you can of course edit that. And then the goal type, which is destination. So there's a URL that we are directing people to. I'll show you the other options shortly. We can see here that you have your goal details and your destination. And I'm probably going to repeat this a few times, but when you are adding a destination URL into your goal, whether it's a template or a custom goal, you don't include the domain, so the main domain. So let's say it's www.digitalmarketing.com/thank-you. You wouldn't include any of that www.digitalmarketing.com. You would just include the / at the end and then the thank you. That is all that is needed. If it is case sensitive, as in you have a capital T or a capital Y, then you need to select that box. The value and funnel sections are optional and quite advanced in terms of there is extra code needed for the value, or you're an e-commerce site, you have different plugins. We will look at that in lesson 5. And your funnels, and that is to do with setting up paths that you expect people to take towards converting. And that is something that will become clearer when we create audiences. Then you have your custom goal, which looks like this. Essentially, your template goal is no different in terms of the setup and the different stages, except for this first bit. This is where the template has already pre-populated this information. You have your goal slot ID, which would automatically change based on adding additional goals. So you add 1, it's goal set 1, 2, it's goal set 2, etc. Then the type here, this is important to pay attention to. So the destination would be to a specific URL. The duration makes sense. It's pretty straightforward. It's the number or the time that someone has spent on your site, as an example. The pages or screens per session, and then an event, which we'll be going into just now. But just on duration and pages per screen or per session, those would be important goals to track if you're looking or focusing on engagement with your site. So you would definitely want to set something like that up, and it is incredibly easy. You don't need additional tracking or anything like that. So I've just filled out an example here. If you look at the destination, you can see there's something called regular expression. There are 3 options in this drop down. You have regular expression, which we will be covering in the next lesson. We have begins with and equal to. So begins with means exactly that. So what does let's say it's the URL, what does it begin with? And then equal to is the exact URL. So as I said, don't include the full domain name in any of the options. You can see here I've chosen a regular expression, and then I've said thankyou.html, and then there's a straight line, a pipe, and then thankyou.com, and that is saying it's going to be thankyou.html or thankyou.com. That is what the little pipe means, but I will remind you of this in the next lesson. Then here I just want to highlight the event type, because that is what we're going to be looking at now. It is more complex than just your standard goal setup. Events are needed if you want to track an interaction, for example, a video play, or in the absence, if you don't have a thank you page after a button click, then you need event tracking. So using a form as an example, you have a lead form. Someone fills it out and presses the submit button, but instead of a thank you page or a new page loading, the confirmation message appears in the same box or the same page. Now, how do you track that? Because someone hasn't changed URLs, there's no way to track that without having some code in place. Event tracking requires a code that's called JavaScript to be added to the object's code on your site or app. And what I mean by object is, for example, the button that is used to submit that lead or to play that video, etc. So after you have chosen the event goal type, you would see the goal details and event conditions. Now, it's optional whether you want to include or set up this goal first and then get the code added to the site, or the other way around. It doesn't really matter. But just like with UTMs, you can see that there are different elements that make up an event. There's the category, the action, the label, and the value. Now, label and value are optional, but let's just explain that a category is the way to group the objects that you want to analyze. For example, it is video views. The action is essentially just naming the type of event that is happening. So it's a play or a click or any kind of action. Then you have your label, which provides additional information and, as I mentioned, is optional. And your value. This is used to assign a numerical value to an object. Let's go through another example. Let us say that the category is a blog. The action would be subscribing to that blog, and the label would be the title of the blog. And the reason why you would want to include the label is so that you know which blog posts are more effective at getting people to subscribe. This is just an example of what the code would look like. You do need some knowledge of coding and in terms of knowing the back end of websites. It also depends on the hosting that you're using for your site. There might be different plugins that make this process a whole lot easier. But if you're using something like WordPress, then have a look around in your account. If someone built the site for you, then chat to them about implementing this code. Then if you look on the right again, just above the save button, there's something called verify this goal. This is available with all the goals that you add and would just show you whether it's working correctly or not. You would need to test this, of course, and if it doesn't work, then you go back to your developer or your plugin and try and fix the problem. You might be using Google Tag Manager, which is really an easier way of managing your tracking. It's a separate Google product with a web-based interface, so meaning you would manage everything through your mobile or desktop to manage tracking and including the more complex event tracking. It is also completely free, so I suggest if you are more interested, then go and check it out. Just look up Google Tag Manager. Then the collection of tags, so the different codes really, and the triggers that fire them are called containers. The way that these containers are set up is based on the requirements and needs of the business. A tag manager container can replace all other manually coded tags, and that is really handy. So once you have this in place, you don't need to have your analytics or your AdWords code on your site. You could actually remove it. Once you've added your events, then where you would see them in analytics is under the behavior section. You would go down to events and then look at your overview, and this is exactly what you're looking at now. You can sort by event category, event action, or event label. So this example is looking at the different labels that the Google Merchandise Store has given to their different events. Then if you click in to see more details on the event label, for example, I've chosen here Google T White, then you can sort by a secondary dimension, which you can see here. And I've chosen to sort by source and medium. And here then we can see that most of the traffic came from organic, so they're not clearly doing a lot of paid media, then followed by direct, and then a referral, so that's Googleplex. So you can see that this is a fantastic way to see which channels are bringing you the highest number or highest percentage of events, and you can then adjust your strategy or your targeting according to that information. Congratulations on completing lesson 3. Well done. I will see you guys very soon for lesson 4. Goodbye, everybody.